Welcome everybody to tonight's event, Security and Tariffs, Europe-Japan Cooperation at a Turning Point. And I'm very happy here tonight. Well, first of all, I'm also very happy to thank, of course, ISPI for having organized this this event tonight. In particular, Antonella, Lili, and Ilaria Vitali for as usually, setting up this this whole. I mean, they're always the brain and the architects setting up those meetings. It's always a lot of work getting all of you here in one piece, despite despite strikes and various problems related to logistics. I'm very happy to have all of you today. So this is the event. It's event number 6 we are doing with in cooperation with the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and of course we're very, very thankful for your year-long support of our Japan-related activities here at ISPI. So thank you very much to the friends and colleagues in Japan. And tonight we have a very, very good panel of colleagues and friends from Japan and from Europe. And there's of course more tomorrow going on. There's more Japan-related EU-Japan activity going on tomorrow. We have another very, very qualified friends and scholars continuing the discussion on EU-Japan tomorrow. What is going to happen tonight? I'll very briefly hand over to my colleagues here. They're going to say a few words, a few kick-off remarks about EU-Japan security cooperation, about tariffs, about various issues related to recent EU-Japan cooperation. Also, if you're interested, and many of you have probably also have received our latest dossier, which has been edited by Guido Alberto Casanova and myself, that just came out today, which is accompanying this conference. All of the conference participants tomorrow, all the speakers have written for this dossier. So if you want to go a little bit go deeper into the matters we are discussing tonight and tomorrow, of course, you can read everything that will be said here tonight, more or less, in the dossier. All right, shall we start the event now? And Kiki Fukushima from Toki Foundation, you'll kick us off. She's written a paper on EU-Japan security, political cooperation, and the floor is yours for about 2 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you. Professor Belkowski or Axel.
Axel, yeah, fine, yeah. That's not the first time we meet, go ahead.
Although I know Axel for many years, I would say, this is my second visit to Milan, and I think it was about 10 years ago when I had the opportunity to visit. So I am very grateful for the invitation, and I'm intrigued by the title of this evening, Security, Tariff, Turning Point. Isn't this a great combination to think over at this time of the day? In terms of security, we talk often about interconnectedness between Europe and the Indo-Pacific. And in fact, we have already sailed together to solidify maritime security from Europe to the Indo-Pacific. And this interconnectedness has started to emerge much stronger over the last decade, but particularly from February 2022, isn't it? Russian aggression to Ukraine has awakened all of us, both in Europe and East Asia. And this is, unfortunately, continuing even today, although I'm hopeful that some sort of peace will be brought in. However, depending on how it is settled, it may give further impetus for us to think and work together. So it is indeed, we are sitting at a turning point. Why do we feel that way? Because Russian aggression to Ukraine constitutes a violation of international law. If a country can survive and win even after violating international law. Others would like to follow suit, want it? And that's the concern we have. And having gone through some supply chain fragility, we started to talk a lot about supply chain resilience. And here we have learned another connectivity, that is security and economy. But I would like to add technology to this two-pole system to three. And we cannot have economic prosperity without geopolitical stability. And unless we can share technological benefits together, we are going to suffer from technological hegemony, if I may put it that way. So all these interconnectedness have forced us to look at Europe-Japan or EU-Japan cooperation. As I said, on maritime security, we have already sailed together. And if you're interested, I can discuss it more. Another thing we started to work together is defense equipment cooperation, isn't it? GCAP? I don't have to give the full name of it, do I?
No, it's
It is a prominent case of UK, Italy, and Japan working together for such a defense equipment. On top of that, Europe and Japan are working together on the railgun as well as Eurodrone. So, and Japan, Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has mentioned that she would like to revise national security strategy, national defense strategy, and national defense build-up program by the end of next year. And that would allow more of our defense equipment cooperation in future. Finally, on economy side, tariffs. We are forced to discuss or negotiate deals these days on tariffs. We do not want to discuss in a bilateral way, but we are forced to. But I would like to make a point that it is very important for us to have a global economic order, including economic security. And for that, of course, we should reform WTO. But if it turns out to be difficult, I would like to suggest to use CPTPP as a platform for us to work together to create global order. Why? Because CPTPP is a living agreement and can adapt to new situations. And there, I would like to see EU to play its role. And the option is not only accession, but other ways of cooperation, as was discussed last week in Melbourne. CPTPP EU dialogue was held, and that was discussed.
Very good. Very good. Very good, Kiki. Thank you very much for kicking us off, with a lot of food for thought already. And of course, when you talk about, very briefly, when you talk about, EU-Japan cooperation in the Indo-Pacific naval cooperation, of course, lots of European naval forces. Italy, above all, Italy has become very, very active in deploying its, naval vessels to the Indo-Pacific, to the South China Sea, to the Taiwan Strait. The Germans are doing it, the Brits are doing it, the French are doing it. So there's a lot of, security cooperation going on the ground. I'm sure we will get back to this later in the discussion, and also when we engage you here in the audience. Chris Hughes is next. Chris Hughes, Warwick University, one of Europe's, maybe Europe's top Japan scholar. Very much, well informed. Has written a lot about the EU-Japan, defense, industrial defense cooperation. And Chris, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Axel. Thank you to ISPI for the very kind invitation to be here. So, as Axel said, I wrote a short paper, which of course you can read in the dossier, about thinking about the possibilities for Japan EU, Europe, and within that I'm including the UK, even though we've decided to do the extraordinary thing of Brexit. Nevertheless, I still feel we are part of Europe. In fact, we're never more has Europe been more important to the UK, and hopefully the other way around as well. So, but I looked at defence industrial production as a potential avenue for expanding and making more substantial EU, Japan, Europe, Japan cooperation. And Fukushima Sensei's already touched upon some of those things. So you can read it yourself, but a few key points from the paper, which maybe might spark some discussion here as well. Firstly, as has just been said, the international system is clearly changing. The structure of the international system is changing. It is under severe pressure. The so-called rules-based international order, we can discuss later on whether that really ever existed, but nevertheless, what the advanced industrial democracies like to call the rules-based international order is clearly under severe stress from Russia, from China, but also from the United States itself, the creator of that region, so of that order. So the system is changing. So that's the first point that I make in the paper. The second point is, therefore, I think European powers, Japan, they're also going to have to change. And I take some issue with this notion of Japan and Europe as middle powers. Yes, they are indeed, in many ways, middle powers, given their relative military capabilities, economic size to some extent, and the way they behave in terms of not trying to behave like great powers and trying to work through multilateral fora and so on and so on and so forth. But actually what I say in the paper is I think perhaps they have to now face up to the reality that they have to sort of somewhat shed some of that identity as middle powers, particularly in the defence area, and they have to think of themselves, and indeed they are, thinking of themselves as greater powers. Not great powers, but greater powers. So they're not great powers because they cannot defend themselves by themselves without the assistance of the United States, but they are going to have to do more to substitute or complement or backfill for the role that the United States will no longer probably take on. Even when Trump is gone, I think probably the long-term trajectory is that the United States has less will and less capability to do what it did before. So that's the reality. So what can they do together? So of course they can do, and they are doing things like joint military exercises, and that the European presence in the Indo-Pacific is very valuable. I think it demonstrates that Japan is not alone, Taiwan is not alone, China does not have the maritime sea space all to itself. And its freedom of action is greatly complicated. But I'm somewhat of a skeptic about some of these European deployments. I think in some cases they could do more harm than good, and they could raise false expectations. I had the privilege of being on board HMS Prince of Wales in Tokyo Bay, the British aircraft carrier. It's lovely to be on that carrier. It's very hot, but it was a wonderful event. But I do think, actually probably military exercises have value. But actually, there are more opportunities to do things which could be more sustained and more meaningful. And this is where defence production comes in. Kiki's already mentioned GCAP, for example, which I think is a very, very important project. But there are other kinds of technologies, key technologies, which I go into in the paper, where, again, I think Europe and Japan really have something to bring to the table in terms of their advanced technology and where they need probably to leverage that cooperation in order to actually be competitive internationally. So, and I think the other point that I make in the paper is that something like GCAP is a different kind of model of collaboration, where actually the partners are equal. It's somewhat different from the kinds of models of cooperation that the United States practices, which tend to be much more hierarchical, much less tendency to share technology on an even basis. Whereas GCAP, I think, gives a much more equal partnership, and it's a model for all kinds of other ways of cooperating. So my time is more or less up, but I think the basic point that I want to make in the paper is the world is changing. I think it's changing in very worrying ways, but I think probably we are not going to go back to a happy system of benign hegemony from the United States. Europe and Japan are going to have to take more responsibilities. I think just saying they're middle powers is probably not going to cut it long term. They have to be greater powers. They have to be more ambitious, and they will have to do more together.
Chris, thank you very much for this. We'll certainly come back to this, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions coming from the audience, on European Japanese defense, defense cooperation, various projects, also the trilateral, Japanese, UK, Italy, defense, the Leonard fighter, the new fighter jet, the new generation fighter jet, cooperation that is certainly, only one of those projects which will be pursued in the years ahead. Of course, it's still, this is certainly something to be skeptical about. It's very early days. The world is changing very rapidly. We are under threat, certainly from Russia, certainly, from China to a certain extent. Certainly also, no longer able to count on the US. And we are, of course, a little bit behind the curve. We have everything in place. We have, the economic agreements with Japan. We have, the political agreements, the SPA, and we've been talking about making a lot of progress over the years, and we are making progress, but we are still a little bit, and I think Chris was alluding to this as well, we're a little bit behind the curve, so we should be doing much more and much more quickly. That is the idea behind also the initiative we're doing here, to try to also come up with a couple of recommendations on how we can really make more progress together concretely on the ground. And there are of course more papers in the dossier by other authors who have been contributing to this dossier, making more recommendations on where Japan and the EU or Japan and European individual member countries, can be making, or will be making, or will have to be making more progress in terms of concrete cooperation in order to enable us at least a little bit more to defend ourselves, economically, militarily. Talking about economics and the economy, economic security. This is something that we go back to Japan. Dr. Suzuki, being very significantly involved in Japanese or Japan's politics or policies related to economic security. Of course, a big issue in Japan, economic security. Kiki alluded to this earlier. Supply chains, rare earth materials above all. And the floor is yours.
Right. First of all, thank you very much, Axel. And thank you very much for ISPI for inviting me to this very monumental timing and this very interesting gathering. So I am currently working as a professor at the University of Tokyo, but also as a director of the Institute of Geoeconomics. And I think, I fully agree with what Chris said about the changing dynamics of the structure of international system from a rule-based order to something else. And I use the term geoeconomics to explain that it is no longer just a geopolitical relationship where the states have power against the other and to balance the power, mainly talking about the military power. But I think today we need to talk about the economic power. And economic power does not necessarily mean that just the size of economy or GDP, but it is about the indispensability and the autonomy. What happened today is that the United States is imposing tariffs for everyone. And this idea is based on that the United States being indispensable market for European Union, for Britain, for Japan, and everybody else. The United States is the largest market, and 70% of this is coming from the personal spending. So the United States is the very significantly important market. Therefore, everyone wants to export. And if you want to export, then the tariffs are the burden. So if you want to reduce the tariff by negotiation, you need to pay something in return. And the European Union pledged like $600 billion. Japan has $550 billion. South Korea, $350 billion. And, on top of that, you need to buy, airplanes from Boeing or, various things, buying a energy from United States. So this is the using the indispensability of market as a negotiating power to impose against others. So that's how you see the geoeconomics. But also the China, which is also the another geoeconomic power against the United States. The United States are no longer able to force China to do something that they want because the China also has an indispensability. The Chinese indispensability is the rare earth. The rare earth mineral, the 80% of rare earth in the world is provided by China. The United States is dependent on the rare earth. Therefore, the United States cannot produce the cars, electronics, or even the defense equipment if there is no supply from China on the rare earth. So China has an indispensability, and China used that as the leverage to negotiate against the United States. This is why, so this is the, a balance between the indispensability of market in the United States against the indispensability of the rare earth or indispensability of goods in China. China has more leverage against the United States. Therefore, the United States has to make concessions, like exporting the high-end chips like H20, or stop to deny the visit of the William Lai, the president of Taiwan, to transit at the United States when he wants to go to the Central and South America. So these are the kind of things that the United States has to concede to China. And eventually, when we see this relationship between the United States and China, then this power or the balance of the indispensability is now being at play. And what we need to do between Japan and Europe is to recognize that we also need to have some sort of autonomy from those dependency on the US market, as well as the dependency on the Chinese goods. In the geoeconomic terms, this dependency is the weakness or the vulnerability. So if you want to reduce the vulnerability, you need to improve your autonomous capabilities. Autonomous does not necessarily mean the autarky or to have the, to isolate yourself. It is to have more trusted partnership, to establish more rule-based order where you share the same idea of rule-based order. And I think Japan and the European Union, or including Britain, is extremely important because of the size of economy. Japan and Europe altogether will be able to compete and create the size of the Chinese or US market. And also we'll be able to build up our own indispensability on the technology. So the GCAP is one thing. The other technologies such as AI and the semiconductor on the other. I think it is extremely important when we talk about the economic security, we need to reduce the dependency on these supply chain from China or the market, China as a market. So I think building up a trusted network of the supply chain and the market, the relationship between Japan and Europe becomes more important than ever to establish this trusted network. So I'll be happy to expand this discussion, but I'll stop here.
Thank you. I mean, of course, I think we have to appreciate. I mean, you ended off on a, or you ended up on a very on a positive note. But the first part of your speech is really I think we have to appreciate not the irony, but the drama of what has been happening over the last 9 months. I mean, the U.S. was trying to coerce China into into reducing its trade deficit, and imposing tariffs on China, thinking that it could convince China to cave in, whereas really who caved in were the Japanese and the Europeans, because we have agreed to 50% respectively U.S. tariffs in return for zero tariffs. So we are losing the trade war against the U.S., which is supposed to be an ally but no longer is, and probably will not be an ally or the ally it used to be. Well, the U.S. of course was losing then big time the conflict with the U.S. As soon as China, and maybe that's a starting point which we can start from in order to initiate some discussion, where as soon as China took out the rare earth trump card out of its pockets, well, not we, but the U.S. caved in very, very quickly, and we ended up being the target of U.S. economic blackmail or coercion policies. Well, China is clearly, at least so it seems for the time being, is still, having the upper hand against the U.S. In that trade and tariff mess that President Trump has unleashed over the last 9 months. We have a lot of time. We have lost one speaker on the way. Francesca Giretti is not going to be able to address us here tonight. So we have more than half an hour, and I would suggest that we open the floor to the audience, and invite the audience and our colleagues from ISPI to address our speakers. The floor is yours. Who wants to start of us? Who wants to start? Yes. Yeah, if you want to come up a little bit closer maybe, and you have a microphone. And you briefly introduce yourself, very, very briefly.
Yeah, I'm Ricardo. I'm a master's student in international relations and hoping to become a diplomat one day. My question, very quickly, would be addressed to all of you, all of our guests, which I thank for the great contributions of tonight. So the question is, you mentioned the need for both Japan and Europe to become greater powers, both strategically, with regards to defense, strategic autonomy. But the question is, more than partnerships, as we're seeing GCAP and a lot of defense-related partnerships, what exactly can accelerate the process to become greater powers? Because, as we said, China and the US have all the leverages, both economically and geostrategically, to prevent Europe and Japan and other middle powers aspiring to become greater to actually achieve that status. So I know it's a very tough question, and if you had the answer to this, you probably would be not saying this to this audience, but I mean, that's still my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ricardo. Chris, do you want to answer first? Because it's sort of your cup of tea. Also Kiki and Suzuki Sensei also, of course, have an opinion on this, I suppose. Chris, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a great question. Thank you very much. I wouldn't. I think your question captures very well just the complexity of the situation that Japan and Europe are in. I'm kind of advocating they need to do more and they need to become greater, not great powers, but greater powers. And to some extent, to use sort of President Trump's language, they don't hold all the cards, perhaps, or they've given some away over time, because in the same way that Suzuki Sensei has been talking about, they've become more dependent, and they've perhaps acquiesced or defaulted into kind of easy access to Chinese market, Chinese technology, and become interpenetrated. And likewise in the defence area, Europeans, they've known for a long time they probably need to spend more on defence, and the US has been signalling, not just Trump, but Obama and others before him, before them, that Japan and Europe need to spend more. But of course, they've always been able to relapse into this kind of easy dependence on the United States. So it's quite hard for the two these two middle aspiring to be greater powers to shake themselves out of that kind of relationship of dependency, but they have to do it. I mean, I think actually, one of the interesting ironies of what Trump is doing is by pushing both Japan and Europe to spend more on defence, so up to 3.5 or 5, some kind of new NATO standard. Therefore, actually, I guess the Americans' hope is that still European and Japan will remain dependent on the US for big-ticket technological defense items, and that is the risk, that it will simply just be spent on sucking in more and more foreign military sales in Japan, or big-ticket items from the United States. But nevertheless, actually, that headroom that is created in defense budgets, if it's spent wisely, if it's invested in more indigenous production capabilities. I think Suzuki Sensei's colleague, Ogi-san's written a very interesting paper talking about how Japanese defense industry has to move from decline to, I can't remember the phrase, kind of rapid expansion, I think. There is going to have to be some very serious choices made about investment, but actually the resources are there, potentially. And there could be a strange irony in that actually Trump, by encouraging and prodding these allies to do more, they will actually become less dependent. So actually the US is going to weaken its ability to influence the behavior of its allies. So I think that's a surge, that's it. I think it's from decline to surging is the name of the paper. So I think that's going to be really important. But also, again, they're just going to have to use their guile. So projects like GCAP are really difficult to pull off, as Axel has indicated. It's incredibly ambitious in terms of timelines, budget, and so on. But nevertheless, actually, they've come quite a long way in quite a short time. And they are trying all kinds of new techniques, new ways of doing things, and sharing technology. So the more of these kinds of projects you can build based on the confidence that you may get from something like GCAP, then the more, I think, Japan and Europe, individually but together, they will become more competent and more capable. And actually, they can become greater powers and less dependent.
Absolutely. Plus, also, we need to take into account what we said earlier. When European naval forces sailing into the Indo-Pacific and conduct exercises with the Japanese Navy or the Navy, Australian Navy, Indian Navy. But this has always been, or very often been, accompanied also by new defense agreements, by new development or projects between European and Japanese defense contractors. And Chris has written intensively on this as well. So it's not only showing up in the Pacific waters, but it's also having very, very concrete results in terms of actual cooperation back home, basically, on a bilateral, trilateral, or multilateral level. Kiki, do you want to address Ricardo's question also, please?
Yes, that's a very good, excellent question, and tough to respond. But let me put it this way. Rather than calling us middle power or willing powers, I would like to look at us as like-minded partners. And Japan did not start working with like-minded countries at our turning point. We started from the first national security strategy. Japan-US alliance is the cornerstone of Japan's foreign and security policy, and that hasn't changed. If you check Prime Minister Takaichi's speech to the Diet in October, she said clearly that US-Japan alliance is a cornerstone of Japan's foreign and security policy. At the same time, since the days of former Prime Minister Abe, we has been strengthening our cooperation with like-minded countries. So it is not just bilateral full stop, minilateral full stop, multilateral full stop, but it's more of a multi-layered network of cooperation. And included in it is EU-Japan cooperation, Japan-UK cooperation, Japan-UK-Italy cooperation. And once upon a time, when we started to work on Quad and other mini-lateral cooperation, people started to ask, are you going to do the alphabet soup again? Or are you going to do the Oriental noodle soup again? No, I don't think so. I think we are trying to have multi-layered structure or architecture of cooperation. Included in it is EU-Japan cooperation, or EU, the Indo-Pacific cooperation, or UK-Japan cooperation. UK has already joined CPTPP, and there we are working together. So it's more of a multi-layered structure, not in a messy Oriental soup structure, but more of a lasagna type.
Okay, good. Okay, this is we're going to be enjoying some lasagna later on tonight. That's for sure. But just to maybe not everybody is familiar with the quadrilateral security dialogue. This is this is the Japan, U.S., Australia, and India. This multilateral defense alignment agreement. It's not really an alliance officially, but this is this grouping of 4 like-minded countries out there to contain or deter China militarily. This is, I mean, absolutely. I mean, sure, it's certainly it's not officially containing everybody, but when you look at the map, and when you look at the geography of where those countries are located, the suspicion might arise that this is really to contain China militarily.
Well, Axel, let me say one thing.
Sure, go ahead.
We started from maritime security, but we have expanded the topic. So when you look at the task force, you'll find a whole variety of agenda.
Sure, absolutely. No, and this is certainly part of the agenda. And of course, the Quad is also, the quadrilateral security dialogue. Of course, Japan is interested in this as well. Japan is very much involved in this, but other European countries are thinking about, France, the UK, thinking about, expanding their on-the-ground cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, with Quad. And other countries as well. Suzuki-sensei, to your question?
Well, mind you that the Quad is supposed to make the summit every year, and this year there was no summit because of the spat between the United States and India. So like-minded is a very tricky word because sometimes, people change minds. So that's
Don't say that. We're doing very well with this like-mindedness.
Yeah, well, of course, the like-minded. I mean, I rather tend to use the word trustworthiness because the like-minded, yes, people change or the administration change, then the mind changes, but the trustworthiness is more objective. How much you can trust the system, how much you can trust the network, how much you can trust the way in which that you deliver the objective. And this is where the Japan and the EU or the European countries are very important because of this system of the rule of law. And I think, what happened between United States and everybody else is now struggling because of the, often that what Mr. Trump is doing is going beyond the law. And I think that's one of the problems. And therefore, I think the trustworthiness is more important than ever. And also, I think I'd like to add what Chris says is that when you talk about the indispensability, if you use that indispensability as a power and impose something on the others, then there will be it creates more incentive to be more autonomous. And if other countries become more autonomous, then you lose your indispensability. So you lose the leverage. And I think what happens is, in terms of the defense spending, is that both Europe and Japan are now spending more and trying to be more autonomous. Of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are fully autonomous from the United States, but we are more capable of doing our stuff without the help of the United States.
Absolutely.
So that's an important element. But at the same time, we need more support, for example, the intelligence sharing or the defense technology cooperation, etc. So, and my colleague, Ogi-san, unfortunately, I read his paper in Japanese, so I didn't come up with his English title. But yes, there are a surge in the Japanese defense spending, and that is, encouraging the Japanese startups and, the defense industry to be more innovative. And that sort of an innovation was the the best cup of tea of the United States, but now it is encouraging everyone else to do the same. So I think, you know, when you have an indispensability, that is the problem when you exercise it. So so you need to make a balance of approach, and to, you know, how much you try and be autonomous, and how less you incentivize other people to be autonomous.
Of course. Just to give you, when Suzuki Sensei talked about surge in defense spending, just to put this into context, maybe not everybody's familiar with this. Back in 2022, Japanese government under Prime Minister Kishida announced to dramatically increase Japan's defense budget from 1% of Japan's GDP to, until 2027, 2% of Japan's GDP. Because Japan is a very, very big economy, and Japan's GDP is very, very big, large, that will, if things go according to plan, which will in 2027 translate into roughly $100 billion, which then, again, if things go according to plan, which will make Japan the world's third largest spender on defense after the US and China. So this is quite dramatic, if this is, and it looks as if this is going according to plan. This is a dramatic and very fundamental, increase of Japan's defense budget, which maybe goes beyond what the European countries, will be able, to pull off in the years ahead. So just to give you some context about the enormous dimension of the envisioned increase of Japan's defense budget. Chris, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Just again, brilliant interventions by my two colleagues. So I don't really disagree, but just on the like-minded states, I think yes. I mean. That's a great phrase, but it has to be substance, right? And it has to be trust, and it has to be kind of deliverables, rather than just talking about like-minded states. And I think the problem we have right now is that you have a United States with a particular kind of president, but it may be a trend. And the US, I don't think the US, we are very much in the realms, disappointingly, of pure power politics, realpolitik, and I don't think Trump presidency could care less about like-mindedness, as you can see, from the behavior of the United States and in the way that it's treated Ukraine, the way it's approached China and other kinds of governments and regimes all over the world. So we have to, like-minded is great, but let's not get too hung up on that. I think Europe and Japan need to have capabilities and be able to deliver things. On the US-Japan alliance, I mean, I'm not suggesting Japan is going to break away from the US-Japan alliance. That's never going to happen. It is indeed the keystone of Japan's security, and I think Japan will continue to deepen and strengthen that alliance. It is very, very important. But it's a keystone, but Japan doesn't want the keystone to be dropped on it. So. If we're talking about indispensability, well, Japan needs to be indispensable to the United States as well. So it needs to be a capable ally that can do things with the United States when the United States wants it to do things, but also when the US is not prepared to do so much. And as I said, Japan is going to have to backfill. Same with European powers as well. But also, Japan needs some leverage. All alliance relationships are things which are negotiated between senior partner and junior partner. Alliances should not be unconditional. They should be about interest, and they should be about capability and leverage and negotiation. So again, Japan needs to be indispensable by being a very useful and capable ally, but likewise, it needs to have other partners as well to show that it's not entirely dependent on the United States, and it has freedom of action to do things when the United States doesn't want to do those kinds of things. So yes, the alliance is indispensable for Japan, but Japan needs to be indispensable to the United States. But that doesn't mean unconditional, simply attachment to the United States. Japan needs to be very clear-eyed with the kind of United States it's dealing with now, and I think it is, and the kind of United States it may have to deal with in the future as an ally.
Okay. What is also indispensable is my request for you to place a couple of additional questions. Please raise your hand again. We have 15 minutes. Can we take Patrick and to start with, and then after Patrick, Patrick Strom, also one of the authors of the dossier, and also a participant in the conference tomorrow from Stockholm in Sweden.
Great, thanks. Thanks for being able to be here, to the organizers. I'm Patrik Ström from the European Institute of Japanese Studies at Stockholm School of Economics. I just wanted to tag along on the discussion on how to build this kind of trust. And I think one very important part that we actually see happening already in a good way between Japan and Europe is, of course, the corporate side. We have tremendous companies, global companies, high-tech companies in so many different sectors. We have examples of very good mergers and acquisitions going both ways. So I think that could also be one way of forging this collaboration and trust building over time. And of course you have companies in defense, but you also have companies in energy and other types of green transition areas. So I think I just wanted to hear your reflection on the corporate side.
Thank you, Patrick. Shall we take one more question by the colleague? Yes, you, please. Yes? And then we give back the
Good
panel.
evening, everyone. My name is Ludovica Favarotto. I am a research assistant here at ISPI at the Age Economics Center. So my question is for Professor Suzuki. You talk about the need for the EU and Japan to build a trusted network, as was mentioned in the question before. My question regards one of the industry that was briefly mentioned, which is the semiconductor one. And here at ISPI, we made a research looking at 3 different areas where we have seen that the economic security concept applied, and one is the semiconductor. I've seen that Europe is really lagging behind, especially when it comes to the CHIPS Act and so the industrial policy. In Japan now we have the Rapidus example, which last Tuesday it was announced that is proceeding, and the second plant is going to be fully operating by 2027. And so my question is, do you have any point to raise, or do you think that what can Europe take as an example from the Rapidus and can implement in the EU as a whole? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, shall we get back to Suzuki Sensei, then address Patrick questions by Kiki and Chris. Suzuki Sensei, your turn, please.
So I have a privilege of having one question. So I'll just let Patrick's question to Fukushima-san and Chris. I think in terms of the semiconductor cooperation, semiconductor has a long, production processes, and there are lots of, supply chain networks. Europe plays a very significant role in terms of the research and funding in IMEC in Belgium, and also Europe has the strong, the perfect indispensability on the ASML, which is providing the lithography machines. So Europe has a point-to-point indispensability, and also Japan has not completely, self-sufficient to do everything. So yes, the semiconductor industry is very much integrated internationally, and of course the Rapidus is collaboration, coming out of collaboration between the IBM and Japan, the Japanese industry. So I think this is not just limited to the EU-Japan relationship, but the EU or European countries play a significant role of supplying, for example, the substances, the chemicals, and the material for the semiconductor production, as well as the machine, the semiconductor manufacturing equipment. So there are a lot of other things, and without the cooperation with the European Union, we cannot have our own semiconductor or Rapidus factory. So. Yeah, that's the industry is more integrated than we thought.
Okay. Well, okay, very good. Kiki, over to you.
I think, in a way, Professor Suzuki has already responded to Professor Strom's question, but I would like to underscore that unless corporations have sufficient trust each other, there is no way for them to work together. And corporate collaboration or some sort of business tie-up would be critical for supply chain resilience and better way to prepare ourselves for future possible economic coercion. When we discuss economic security, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but we often talk about how to restrict, how to defend ourselves from possible economic coercion. But at the same time, I think it is very necessary for us to have capacity, flexible capacity to share subject, item of coercion, so that the other country who would like to use economy as a weapon do not see it so enticing to use it. To put it in Japanese, it's yuzu suru noryoku, so a way to share some of the difficulties together with our sufficient capacity. And I think that's the essence of supply chain resilience. And as all of you are making point about trust, I think trust would be vital. And maybe you're familiar with the Singapore-based think tank called ECS. They do annual opinion poll. And in that, I found Japan and EU are the top highest countries in the region that are trusted by ASEAN countries. And that should be the base for us to work on. I still would like to see rules and norms to be worked out, not in the name of global order, but maybe in norms and rules are necessary for us to keep things on track.
Absolutely. Of course, it is also, and before handing over to Chris, of course, it is about trust and and making oneself indispensable. But it's of course also, as my colleague at ISP alluded to earlier. Yes, we have the European Chips Act, and we have lots of ideas on how to become less dependent on others, and to decrease supply chain risk or risk related to supply chains. But of course, that's a long-term project. Until it's not happening tomorrow or day after tomorrow. We have a Chips Act, but when will we be able to produce our own chips? That's what, maybe 10 years along the line. So it's a long time. It's a long-term project. All the ideas are on the ground, and maybe this is a little bit to what I was skeptical about at the beginning, that we have all the ideas on the table, but we're a little bit behind the curve, in terms of actually producing the goods on the ground, despite the trust that we already have, and that sounds all very good. But we also need the goods on the ground, or not, Chris? Anything else?
I don't think no.
Good, no problem.
I have no greater wisdom than my colleagues on this, or Patrick himself, who
that always happens to you
100 times more than I do. So.
No, absolutely. We have more time. We had another 10 minutes. Yes, please. Two more questions. Yes.
Two more questions.
Yes,
Hello,
sure.
My name is Paula. I also work here at ISPI at the Asia Center.
I know.
And I know you do. And I actually have a question that I hope it's quick to answer to, so we can have two questions. Whether you think that the relationship between European Union and Japan may change with the new Prime Minister in Japan, and if you think that their political ambitions or their political ideas may influence cooperation in a certain sector rather than another, whether you see space for cooperation in some specific areas. That's my question.
Okay, very good, Paula. Thank you. Chris, what do you think? What is the impact of Japan's newly elected or new Prime Minister on the quality and scope of cooperation with us?
I mean, we'll have to see, but my instinct is how long has she been PM? About a month or so. But so my instinct is that I mean, clearly she's got a somewhat different style from a couple of her predecessors. She's a sort of the Abe 3.0 in a way. But I mean, I don't see any fundamental deviation from Japan's strategy that was really laid down under Abe and his successors largely, even if they slightly shaped it slightly differently or called it different things. Essentially, they kind of largely carried on his legacy in foreign and security policy. So I think, I mean, she said some interesting things which have got Japan in a rather difficult situation at the moment with with China. And again, the United States seems to be blowing rather hot and cold in terms of how, lending diplomatic support to Japan right now. But I think all of that will just simply, again, reinforce the kinds of rhetoric, but also I think the kind of project, very much the substantial project that Takaichi has, which is that she feels that Japan is in a very difficult international environment, and the only way out of it is to double down, triple down on the relationship with the United States, but also to keep looking, as Fukushima Sensei said, in this multi-layered strategy to look for, build Japan's own national capabilities, but also try to do what you can with other partners to reinforce and bind in the United States, but also create some space to do things when, again, the United States looks like it's it's less likely to come to the assistance of Japan. So I see pretty much continuity, really, with some some slight difference in rhetoric, and maybe some mistakes and mishaps along the way, but essentially the same strategy.
Absolutely. I mean, before handing over, just to give some background, of course, many of you know when you said some interesting things about Asian security. She suggested maybe something that we already knew, that that everybody knew already, that Japan would, of course, in the case of a Chinese attack on Taiwan, defend Taiwan militarily. This is what what was not very much appreciated in China, as we know, and this has led to this mini diplomatic crisis between Japan and China. Suzuki Sensei.
Right. Well, this mini crisis is based on the misinterpretation, or deliberate misinterpretation by China. So what Takaichi says was not so different from traditional Japanese point.
Sure.
Well, just one thing to add to what Chris said is that Takaichi has put the higher priority on this growth strategy. And I am fortunately the member of the expert panel on this growth strategy discussion. And there are 17 strategic areas where the Takaichi put the higher priority, and one of which is nuclear fusion. And there is a ITAR, which is the nuclear fusion technology. Well, it's an international collaboration. The fusion installation in France. And I think this, nuclear fusion technology is also another interesting part of doing the collaboration with Europe. So this is one example, but this 17 different sectors, especially she's interested in the dual-use technologies. So the GCAP, there's a deliverable or the spin-off from a GCAP project on the sensors and communications, the fiber optics communications, as well as there are many other things that Japan and Europe can work together in terms of these dual-use technologies, and Takaichi put very high priorities. And this is somewhat different from previous administrations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We had one more question. We have 5 more minutes. Yes, please go ahead, and then we can wrap
Good
it up.
evening.
Even more. We'll see. Okay, go ahead. Yes.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Rebecca, my PhD candidate. Thank you very much for the panelists for the presentation. I have 3 main points. I try to be super brief. So the first one is that I found quite funny that now the USA are the actors that are considered untrustworthy, because I'm researching China's economic statecraft, so throughout my PhD there was this kind of obsession about the China threat, etc., and now is the US weaponizing chokehold, so that's quite funny for me. And then my second point was on the role of the EU, which was considered as kind of like a battlefield between the US and China, so it was like being courted by the US and also by China, and now this thing seemed to change completely, because it's sanctioned by one and then straight on ignored by the other. And I think that it kind of lost quite some leverage that it could have had to exploit in this sort of relationship. And that brings me to my third point, which is about something you said, that EU and Japan needs to be autonomous from dependency from the US market and Chinese goods. Well, who's left then, right? So these two actors are a huge part of the market. And my question maybe is, what do you think about the relation that the EU can have with India. So I've seen that right now there has been a strategic dialogue with Kaya Kallas in India. Could that be sort of a last resort option or not so last? And what do you think about that? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for opening up to India also. So that's maybe for the next seminar. Well, maybe you have a minute. We'll talk about it. Exactly. We have one more question in the back. Please. There are two questions, but you make up your mind. Who's? Yes, please. Go ahead. India. All right. Okay. India. Okay. Stay on topic, please. No additional countries.
No additional countries
Okay, good.
here. Yeah, thanks to the speakers, it was very insightful. So my name's Aditya and I'm from Aleph, a geopolitical think tank. So Professor Suzuki spoke about the supply chain vulnerabilities that the countries face, especially in case of China and the US. And as we know, the EU imports 80% of its defense needs. So does this open up potential collaborations between Europe and Japan, especially in the case of rare earth elements? And is this something that, that's it. Yeah.
Okay, very good, thank you. So I'll give because 2 more minutes, we give it back to the panel, starting with Chris maybe, addressing the points you want to address, and then moving along the panel without me.
Yeah, very, very quickly. Great observations about the way the international system is kind of getting turned on its head, in the US weaponizing economics, whereas that's the thing that China was accused of. The EU, I don't know enough about EU, but it seemed quite irrelevant actually in a lot of this trade war. It's really surprisingly ineffective and bypassed. But I suppose, a question about India, I'm not an expert, but I suppose going back to my earlier comments, I think we are not quite in a multipolar world, but we're getting something like that. And, in a multipolar world, middle powers, greater powers, are going to have to be quite inventive in looking around for what you might call like-minded states or states with similar interests. India's potentially one, but again, it's quite a difficult partner to work with. But nevertheless, I think we are going to see many more of these kind of free-ranging sort of deal cutting. Sounds very Trump-esque, isn't it? But sort of, not always fixed alliances. I think we're going to see lots of kind of quite fluid alliances across different kinds of states. So I think that may be the trend to come.
Okay, thank you. Kiki, famous last words.
India is having a tough time with US tariffs, and countries are trying to have dialogue with India, not particularly on the tariff itself, but trying to send a message that if there are anything we can do together, we are ready to do it, and that's an important message for India. And India is not the only case. There are numerous cases, as we know, who suffer from numerous problems. If we can work together on some of the points that they suffer, that would make situations better, I believe. And on China, 2019 EU strategic outlook portrayed China as partner, competitor, and systemic rival. And for long, Europe was more for the partner, then gradually shifted to competitor and systemic rival. But Europe has never given up partner section of the assessment. And people often say that Japan has different perception of China compared to Europe. I don't think so. Japan also regarded China on 3 different ways. We have moved a bit earlier than Europe towards a competitor-rival factor, but we have never, ever given up our partner relationship with China. And our statistics, trade statistics, show how much we are interdependent. And therefore, I don't see Europe and Japan that different in terms of assessing threats or concerns.
No.
And there I see a possible cooperation to take place.
Absolutely. You know, I'm getting really concerned about, you know, Japan taking China away from us, you know, because China is, of course, also this, when we talk about the partnership, and this, I think this is important, sorry about me interrupting, but this is important because when we talk about partnership and cooperation with China, this has been very much reduced to policies related to climate change. You know, this is always being cited. You're a competitor, systemic rival, but still a partner in climate change. But then you look onto the agenda, what is actually going on with regards to EU-Chinese cooperation on climate change is very, very little, very, very limited. So, you know, let me assure you that the partnership, you know, equation of this has also been very, very limited. And this is certainly very, very similar to Japan. Suzuki-sensei, over to you, last 1.5 minutes, and then we wrap it up.
Okay, for the last question, if I get correctly, I think, you know, again, you know, the thesis is similar. I mean, at the end of the day, if you need to, you know, reduce the dependency and the vulnerability, you need to, you know, build up autonomous capabilities. And for the defense equipment, yes, of course, you know, this, as Chris mentioned, there are a lot of, you know, opportunities for Japan and Europe to work together. With regard to India, I think India has a lot of potential. But the problem is that India itself is now restricting by its own protections. I mean, India is the least open country. I mean, its tariff is by far higher in the WTO members, and India has a very complicated, you know, regulatory system at the federal level and the state level, and India is very much, you know, there are a lot of bureaucratic red tapes everywhere, and you know, there are a number of Japanese companies have already challenged to penetrate into Indian markets. The Maruti Suzuki is one of the most successful ones. The Daikin, the air conditioner company, is another. But you know, there are millions of other companies which challenge the Indian market and then failed because of these difficulties. So I think India needs to reform itself, and otherwise it won't expand, or it won't capitalize its potential. So I think there, you know, it will take time, and I think eventually it will come to a certain point. But India still it's still, you know, limit itself in this geo-economic competition in the world.
Absolutely. No, thank you. And also, of course, last word on India. Of course, you know, the European Union has been negotiating a free trade agreement with India since forever, basically. And you know, and despite, I mean, look, it's still out there. They're still negotiating, but it's very, very complicated because you know, because India is a very, very complicated. I mean, you shouldn't be saying this because lots of Indian students, one of my students here in the audience, but India is a very, very complicated country when it comes down to trade, and there has been lots of negotiations, and there's still a lot of resistance within Indian policymaking circles to make any real progress. The same problem Japan is facing. So we have again something in common, you know, a problem with India, you know. Let's say that's you know, starting on this very, you know, non-optimistic note. Well, thank you very much to all of you, to the audience, of course, to our speakers for tonight. Applaud yourself. And there's more tomorrow. So, you know, there's more of this, much more of this tomorrow. But again, thank you very much for holding on for so long. You know, it's late in the evening. And, you know, see you next time. Thank you very much. Good night.